if you were to come into contact with a ghost, what would you do? Now, if you don't have an answer to that question right off the top of your head, then you're in the right place. Because nearly everyone comes into contact with a ghost or disembodied being at some point in their lives. And just because you don't have an outright meeting with a ghost doesn't mean that they're not there. Our five senses are very limited, and they only perceive a small portion of what's actually going on around us. Humanity is experiencing a mass awakening. The veil is either lifting or becoming very thin for an increasingly large percentage of our population. People are becoming more and more sensitive and aware that energies and entities are constantly moving in and out of our spaces. In this video, I'm going to share a personal story about how I helped a friend clear multiple, but not all of the ghosts out of their space, and how I ended up getting a bit more than I bargained for out of that experience. This story is wild, from the beginning to the very end, and my hope in sharing it is that you can learn something from my experience, apply it to your own life, have more knowledge, more wisdom, increase your ability to discern what's going on in the situations where and if you do come into contact with a ghost or disembodied being in the future. What's up? I'm Ian with Alternate Timelines, and the story that I'm going to share today is just one example of the many times that I have personally encountered a ghost or disembodied being. And while I have had multiple experiences with ghosts throughout my life, it was never something I was actively seeking out. These situations just arose. Either the entity or ghost came into my space, or I entered their space. And it's been a whole wide range of experiences, from relatively pleasant and short-lived to more challenging and difficult, uncomfortable, and longer duration. It's been a whole wide range, and what your ghost experience is going to look like is something that I can never predict. They, in my experience, have all been different and all been unique. In the story I'm about to tell you, I took on the task of clearing several unwanted entities out of a space. Now, I'm not necessarily endorsing this idea or recommending that you should try to do this on your own. In this instance, I checked in with my intuition, and I got an affirmative. It's like, yes, I do have the tools necessary to accomplish what I want to do here. And there have also been times where I got a very clear message like, hey, do not mess with this. This is above your head, out of your pay grade. Just walk away from the situation. And I've always done that as well. It's really important to check in with yourself and follow your own intuition in these sorts of situations and circumstances. There are many very gifted people out there who specialize in this sort of work, dealing with ghosts and entities and clearing spaces. And if you're ever in doubt, I would always recommend to seek assistance and seek guidance and look for help from somebody who has a solid grasp on what they're doing and maybe has some experience. What I'm trying to do here is to shine a light on an aspect of our reality that most people will encounter at some point, and to let you know that it's not something that has to be fear-inducing or cause you to be afraid. In many circumstances, we do have the ability to interact with these ghosts and entities and help resolve the situation. But before I tell my story, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever had an experience with a ghost or disembodied being? What was it like? Do you think ghosts aren't real and this is complete nonsense? Let's have a conversation. Leave a comment below. I would love to hear your perspective. All right. Once upon a time, my partner and I stayed with a friend of ours for a few weeks. This friend was regularly doing a variety of different ceremonies in their home. We had been there for just a few days, and we recognized and realized that there were energies and entities. There was something going on. It wasn't just us in that space. It finally got to the point where my partner and I just sat down with our friend and said, hey, we're experiencing entities and ghosts in this space. Are you also having the same experience? And our friend did confirm, like, yeah, I thought something was going on. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but they also recognized that something was afoot. And to me, that's not super surprising in a space where there are a lot of ceremonies being held. Those kind of spaces just seem to be very active and tend to draw in more attention from the spiritual and metaphysical world. In these kind of environments, energetic hygiene is really important. And doing whatever we can, whether it's rituals or some sort of practice to help clear the space, is going to be helpful. And nothing is 100%. No matter how much sage you burn, it is never going to be perfect. You will never fully eradicate the ability for entities or energies to come and leave the space. After acknowledging what was going on and talking about it, the three of us decided that we were going to try to clear out those energies. And at that point in time, it was kind of unclear whether or not we were dealing with ghosts or a different kind of entity or some sort of lingering energy or thought form. We could just tell that there was something there, even though we weren't specifically clear on what it was. And even though we didn't know exactly what we were dealing with in that moment, the three of us had had quite a bit of experience facilitating ceremonies and dealing with various situations. And we all got a pretty good read on it. And while it didn't feel like a very warm and inviting energy, it wasn't super heavy and it wasn't super threatening or really dark. It totally felt like something we could help manage and help resolve on our own. So a few days later, I think on the full moon, the three of us did a mushroom ceremony. And we took a relatively small dose of mushrooms. The intention was to tap into the energy of the space and open up a connection and create a dialogue with whatever was lingering in the space. Whenever I find myself in one of these kind of situations, I always take into consideration the fact that just because a ghost or spirit is not in a body doesn't mean that they're not a being that's worthy of love and compassion. In the majority of my personal experiences with ghosts that tend to just linger in a space, when you actually communicate with them, they're confused. They don't really know what's going on. And in many of the cases, they don't even realize that they're dead. They find themselves in this perpetual state of limbo, in between two worlds, not knowing which one that they're in, usually because they have some sort of energetic attachment to the 3D plane. And those energetic attachments prevent them from continuing to go on their journey back into the spirit realm. I approach these kind of situations very gently. You'll never see me coming in hot saying, "Be gone, ghost, demon, leave this space. Be gone, you are not welcome here. By the power of God," that is just not my approach whatsoever. Imagine you're sitting on your couch, watching Netflix, reading a book, doing your thing, and it's maybe late in the evening, and you hear an unexpected knock on your front door. You go to investigate, and it's a little old lady who is lost and doesn't know where she is. Maybe she doesn't know her name. She probably doesn't know how she got to be at your house, but she's just looking for help. Imagine somebody with dementia just showing up at your front door looking for assistance. That is often the kind of energy that I experience from ghosts. They're just lost and confused. And I know if a little old lady who is lost and confused showed up at my front door, I wouldn't come at them hard and say, "Get out of here, be gone." That is just not, in my opinion, a loving and compassionate way to deal with anybody, being somebody who is alive or somebody who's not in a body, because they are still beings. Everything in the universe is seeking equilibrium or some sort of resolution to an issue or tension. If you drop a rock into a pond, you create ripples, but eventually it smooths out. If you have something on a pendulum and you drop it, it'll swing back and forth, but eventually it comes to equilibrium in the middle. These entities and ghosts, they are seeking some sort of resolution and trying to find equilibrium. They just obviously don't know how to accomplish that. Otherwise, they would do it on their own. So the three of us set up an altar and create a ceremony with a very specific intention of finding resolution to whatever is going on with these ghosts or entities that is causing them to continually come into the space. We're trying to figure out what's going on here and help move them on to the next part of their experience so that they no longer have to continue to cohabitate with us. We each take the mushrooms and enter our own meditative states and our own little stations set up around the room. There's not a lot of talking happening, just being present, tapping into this energy of the space, and waiting. Wouldn't you know it, before long, I feel an energy coming in from my right as I'm sitting on the couch. As the energy got stronger, I recognized that there was a disembodied being or ghost there, and I was able to begin communicating with it. In those kind of situations, your consciousness really overlaps and you're sharing a sort of mental space. In that space, the being didn't have to explain anything to me. I could just read its history and its thoughts and its experiences. They were just available to me. This ghost was named Thomas. And based on what I could infer and pick up from his energy and his past experiences, Thomas was alive during the Civil War era. And Thomas also spent time in St. Louis, which was quite a ways away from where this experience happened. So I don't know how Thomas got from St. Louis to where we were at, but who knows? I didn't ask questions about that. Thomas had worked on steamboats on the Missouri or Mississippi River, the big kind of steamboats with the paddles. He worked in the bottom of one of those, shoveling coal into the big steam engines that would run those steamboats. I think he may have been an emancipated slave. I'm not entirely sure, but he somehow got to St. Louis, and when he was there, he met a woman named Annie. And the communication that I did get from him, beyond being able to read his life story, so to speak, was that he was looking for Annie. And it clicked right then. Oh, he's looking for resolution, and the resolution that he is seeking is to find Annie. Being able to access his memories, I could see that he had developed tuberculosis, and he had gotten really, really sick and eventually died from it. And my sense was that Annie was either a nurse that took care of him, or more likely somebody that he was having an affair with and had fallen in love with, but didn't necessarily love him back. It felt like a very one-sided sort of relationship. Thomas was super gentle and had a very kind and soft-spoken sort of energy, very warm and inviting. But he was confused and he was lost and he was looking for Annie. And he began to get closer and closer, and I relaxed and allowed Thomas's being, his energy, to inhabit my body in a style of mediumship, and he began speaking through me. In that state, I am in control. I could have stopped it had I wanted to, but it seemed like there was something he wanted to communicate. And the analogy that I use is like taking the passenger seat in the car and allowing somebody else to drive temporarily. And while he was in the driver's seat, I could feel my mannerisms change and my voice changed, or the voice that was coming out of my body changed. I started to hunch over a little bit, and my partner and my friend who was in the room recognized this as well. And they had a conversation with Thomas through me. And he was able to give more details and talk a little bit about his experience. In that, it became abundantly clear, yeah, he was unaware that he was dead and still looking for Annie. You know, when you're in that state, you lose track of time. He didn't realize he had been lingering for decades, many decades. I don't know exactly how long, but lingering on the earth plane, just basically being lost. Through this dialogue that happened between my partner, my friend, and Thomas, who was speaking through me, it became clear that we needed to get Annie. This period of time where Thomas was speaking through me, it didn't last very long. We gathered the information we needed pretty quickly, and when it became clear that he didn't have anything more to share, he exited my body and remained in the space, but was just kind of lingering there. From that point, the three of us in the room asked for guidance and assistance from our spirit guides. We asked them to help locate Annie, bring her here so that she could help bring Thomas to the next stage of his journey and help get him off the physical plane where he was stuck looking for her. Seemed like a pretty straightforward solution. Get a hold of Annie, bring her here, and have her help escort Thomas to heaven or the next step in his journey. Our guides were successful in locating Annie and bringing her in. The thing is, she was not pleased. She did not want to have anything to do with Thomas or this situation whatsoever. She came into the space really quickly, and the whole vibe and energy of the room totally flipped. That was the point where I realized that when I was picking up from Thomas, this feeling like it was a one-way relationship, that was 100% accurate. I don't know if he was stalking her or what exactly was going on there, but he obviously wanted more from her than she was willing to give, and she did a lot and made great effort to distance herself from him. So I don't hold it against her whatsoever, her vibe and the energy that she brought. But she did, in some energetic way, take him by the hand, and we could all feel their energy lift up. When Thomas came into the room, he came in from my right, and when she came into the room, she came in from up and straight ahead of me. Their energies connected, and they both went straight up. And shortly thereafter, you could feel her energy depart, you could feel his energy depart, and the room just became very quiet and very still. All three of us in the room just looked at each other like, hey, that was not exactly what we expected, but it feels like there was some resolution to the situation, especially for Thomas, being the fact that he was able to ascend in one way or another. At that point, it really felt like mission accomplished. Our space was quiet and chill, and we could just continue on and finish out our mushroom journey in peace. So we're sitting there in the space, and then from straight ahead of me, at ground level, at some point shortly thereafter, we could sense another energy in our space, coming into our space. Well, it didn't actually come into our space, but it was lingering on the outside of our space, and it felt like it wanted to let us know that it was there. And this energy, it was not warm and inviting, but it never made an attempt to interact with us. It was just there in kind of an ominous sort of a way. I don't even know how to explain it, but it wanted us to know that it was there and that it wasn't exactly friendly to us. And it didn't feel like we could force that interaction. So we just, chalked it up as, okay, we did what we could do here. Let's finish this ceremony. Let's wrap this up and we'll figure out what to do in the morning. In the days following that experience, it really seemed like Thomas had moved on. None of us could sense his presence anymore. And for that, we were glad and grateful that he was able to continue on his journey. After the first ceremony, it was clear that there was still some entity lingering around. And while we were trying to figure out exactly what our course of action was going to be moving forward, in the middle of the night, probably 2 or 3 nights after our interaction with Thomas, my partner and I were staying in a guest bedroom, and there was an attached bathroom. At some point, middle of the night, lights are off, everybody in the house is sleeping, we hear a pop, an explosion. We get up out of the middle of our sleep, start looking around, can't find anything. It's really unclear to us what had happened that had caused this loud popping sound. It wasn't until the next day where I got up and went to the bathroom, flipped the light switch on, and nothing happened. I started to investigate, and I find that there is a light fixture above the mirror in the bathroom, and the light bulb that was in it had exploded. And immediately I knew that it was a message or a sign from that entity that it was not happy with us being there. Do I have any sort of tangible evidence of this? No. But when I leaned into my intuition and asked, was this something to do with that entity that seemed pissed off? I got a resounding yes, and my partner did too. It seemed very clear that we were being sent a message from that entity. From there, we did our rituals and did what we could to clear the space, but this energy was quite persistent. So a week or 2 later, we decided that it was appropriate to do another mushroom ceremony and figure out what was going on with this other entity. Similar situation as before, we set up our altar and have an intention for this ceremony to help bring resolution and help this spirit that's lingering move on to the next phase of their journey, whatever that may be, and however that may look. The journey kicks off, and at one point, I'm kneeling on the floor, I think pulling tarot cards, and I sense this energy coming up from behind me. And it was the same energy that had made itself known in the first ceremony, and it was the same energy that had been lingering in the space. Again, I signaled to my partner and my friend who was in the room that something is happening. I can feel a presence coming up behind me. This second experience was quite different than my first experience with Thomas, where Thomas was open and warm and willing to communicate pretty openly. This energy, it felt more closed off and standoffish and untrusting in a way. This entity did not want to engage with me the same way that Thomas did, and it only got so close. But even though it didn't fully come into my being and speak through me, I was able to open up a form of telepathic communication with it, and our consciousness could overlap, and I was able to get some information from it. Even though it was different from Thomas, it was clear that there was something on this earthly realm that was keeping it here. I was not able to get a name from it. The only thing that I got was the cold one. I asked it what its name was, and it just said the cold one. And it did feel cold. While I was communicating with it, I was chilly, and my partner and my friend who were in the room also felt a chill. The cold one was rather standoffish, but again, I was able to get some information from it. The cold one was an indigenous person who had been dead for a long time, and it seemed that the cold one was somewhat more aware of the fact that it was dead than Thomas. I believe that the cold one understood that it was not alive, whereas Thomas didn't really have that understanding. And some of the mental images and information that I got from the cold one, basically its story was summed up as this indigenous person had been kicked out of their community and ostracized, and it was a masculine. He didn't tell me what he did exactly to get him kicked out of his family and his indigenous community, but whatever it was extremely taboo, so much so that I think what happened is that the people in his indigenous tribe tied him up and buried him alive. They excommunicated him and they broke all ties. They said, "You are not part of our group. We want to have nothing to do with you. You are not one of us." They tied him up and they buried him alive. And I believe that's how he passed away. Again, I don't know what he did to cause his family members to want to end his life, but it must have been something pretty gnarly. Either way, that was his story. Through gathering this information about the cold one, I realized that because he'd been kicked out of his community and his society, he was all alone. And somehow, some way, he connected with Thomas, and Thomas became an ally or a companion to him. Part of the reason he was so salty towards us and brought negative energy into the space was because he was upset that through our actions, his friend went away. And I don't know if they were exactly friends, but he finally had a companion, and we helped to essentially create a situation where he was alone again. And because of that, he was not friendly towards us whatsoever. This communication between myself and the cold one was happening telepathically, and I was also kind of translating or relaying the messages I was getting to my partner and my friend who were also in the ceremony with me. After a little bit of communication back and forth and hearing his side of the story and feeling his energy, it's like, okay, we come to a similar sort of situation where the cold one is seeking resolution of some sort. His problem is that he has become disconnected and excommunicated from his ancestors and his tribe and his community. And that seemed to be the most straightforward way to find resolution. Reconnect him to his ancestors, his tribe, and his community. So we essentially did something very similar to what we did in the first ceremony. Myself, my partner, and my friend all asked our spirit guides for assistance in the situation to help us find the Cold One's ancestors, bring them in so that he knows he's not alone. We all have ancestors and spirit guides, and somehow he had gotten disconnected from them. I think that when he passed away, he was in such a distraught state that I don't know if it was a curse or somehow he put up some sort of energetic block between himself and his ancestors because he was so mad about the situation and the fact that he had gotten kicked out. And the mental image that I got from the Cold One in regards to this situation, that off in the distance, there was a ceremonial fire, and it was surrounded by indigenous people who were his ancestors and his elders. Yet he was removed from it, and he wasn't able to get close to the ceremonial fire. And that's why he was cold. In that sense, it wasn't just a physical cold, but it was a metaphorical cold because he couldn't get close or have access to his ancestors or his guides. So with the help of our spirit guides, we were able to connect with the ancestors of the Cold One and let them know that he wanted to reestablish that communication and he wanted to rejoin the group around the ceremonial fire. And very similar to the first experience with Thomas, where he went up with Annie, I could feel, and everybody in the room could feel, the presence of these indigenous elders descend into the space. They interacted and connected with the Cold One. There was a sort of reconciliation. It felt like the energy became more subdued, less sharp, less cold, less rigid and confrontational. And he kind of merged with the energy of that group. And in the same way that they descended, they ascended, and they went up and brought him with them. And once they had left our space, things really chilled out and became very relaxed, and it became clear that there had been some sort of resolution to the situation. The Cold One, after what was probably hundreds of years, was finally able to reconnect with his ancestors and move on to the next stage of his journey. He was no longer trapped on the earthly plane. In the days following that second ceremony, it felt like we'd finally gotten to a place where, okay, I think we're alone here. I think we've accomplished what we need to accomplish in trying to clear out these entities and these ghosts that were lingering in the space. When interacting with Thomas, somebody asked him, "Why did you come here? What is bringing you into this space over and over again?" And his response was pretty straightforward. He said, "Well, there's a lot of beings coming and going from here. This is a comfortable space that's inviting and accepting of these kind of energies and entities and non-physical beings. This is just a cool spot and a comfortable place to hang out." With that information, we knew we had to do a little bit better about creating energetic boundaries. So moving forward, we started to be more focused and intentional about energetic hygiene and creating rituals and different practices that we had known in the past but weren't necessarily using, that help to block energies and maintain a more stable space and let beings know that this maybe isn't an appropriate hangout spot, especially if there are people coming in to do ceremonies. And after that, the energetics of that home became much more stable, and there were much fewer incursions by outside entities and ghosts and energies. That being said, there was a third entity that would visit fairly regularly. Specifically, I would notice it at a certain time of the day when I was on the second floor of this home. This third entity had a masculine energy, and it would never really enter the room I was in, but it felt like it would come to the door and peek its head in. I didn't get a strong positive or negative or uplifting or challenging energy from it. It was really super neutral. And My partner noticed it and we brought it up to our friend. And the message that I got when I leaned into my intuition was like, hey, this is not your responsibility. This isn't your home. This is an opportunity for your friend to learn how to better manage the boundaries around their own space. The best thing I could do at that point was to encourage my friend to continue with the energetic hygiene of the space and to help give them and share any tools and practices that I knew that could assist with that in clearing the space and keeping it clear of unwanted energies and entities. Now, I understand that my approach is maybe not the approach that everyone else would take. There are many different ways to achieve resolution and to help entities and ghosts move on to the next stage of their journey and to clear spaces and all that. I totally get it 100%. And when it comes down to it, we did get the result we were looking for in helping my friend to clear some of, or at least the most prominent and problematic energies from their space. Again, I'd love to hear if anybody else has a story that's similar to this, or if you have some tips or ideas or practices that you'd be willing to share. Leave a comment below. I'm sure there are many people who could benefit from learning more about these sorts of situations. And I want to encourage anyone who is dealing with energies that are in their space that may be unpleasant or disruptive to, if you don't feel confident in your own skills to be able to resolve them, again, reach out to somebody who does. There are plenty of people out there who are very skilled in entity removal and doing this sort of work. I don't personally believe that there's a right or a wrong way to do it, but there are potentially easier ways than the one I just described. So if you found this useful or helpful in any way whatsoever, please subscribe, like, leave a comment below. Any support is deeply appreciated. And yeah, I've got many more stories coming up, so stay tuned. And with that, I love y'all. Thanks for watching. Peace.